right. After 3 decades of directing and commercials, documentaries, narrative, I started a YouTube channel, and I want to tell you why, because the reason has nothing to do with building a following or making money from content. It's because over the last few years, it's become really apparent to me that as a creative, your portfolio, your work is only one half of the equation. The other half is you. Okay, most of you are not going to want to hear this, and part of you is probably already pushing back. You are as much the product as the work you produce. The film you make, the story you write, the book you publish, the campaign you direct, these are expressions of a creative author that is itself the thing people are connecting with. The work is just an artifact of this dialogue. You are the ongoing source. A couple of days ago, I was rebuilding my portfolio site and I was rewatching a film I shot in Mexico from a few years back. And this is a brand campaign I shot for Under Armour. It's a minute and a half of light and motion. It took me 5 days to shoot, weeks to concept, write, and prep, months in post. And I watched it and I thought, damn, that's pretty good. Then it dawned on me, few watching that film know why it's good. They can feel it. They respond to it. But they can't see the reason behind the accumulated decisions that produced it. See the work, the end product, the surface, that's sort of veneer of the casual view. They don't know the operating system that made that work. Now, the people who did know, my clients who hire me again and again, the collaborators who trust my judgment on set, they know because they've been close enough to see it. They'd watched me work. They'd heard me think out loud, like, why this frame and not that one, or why this music choice or not this other piece. That proximity is where trust is built. For most of my career, that was enough. The work spoke for itself because producing work at that level was the signal. If you could make something that looked and felt like that, you clearly knew what you were doing. Now, that was true for almost the entire history of creative work, but it stopped being true about 3 years ago. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your creative process might be the most important thing you're not sharing, and why every day you keep it private, you're becoming invisible to the people who'd value it the most. All right, here's what happened. 2 forces have collided at the same time, and that collision has changed the fundamental economics of creative work. The first, restrictions. The internet dissolved restrictions. Communication was local. Information was local. Business was local. Opportunities were all local. It was centuries of this, and then in the span of my generation, it all went global, and social media accelerated the process. What we call going viral was really the first time in human history an idea could travel from one mind to millions without passing a single gatekeeper. The second, AI. And AI has now collapsed the barrier to competent outputs. A passable logo, a decent script treatment, a serviceable edit, a clean layout. What used to take decades of accumulated taste can now be generated in an afternoon with a subscription. That means the floor of creative competence has risen dramatically, and it happened almost overnight. Each of these forces alone would have transformed creative careers, but together they created something no one fully anticipated. And I call this the creativity crisis. And we'll get deep into that in some other videos, but the basic logline is the finished product is no longer a reliable signal of the authorship behind it. Now, let me say that again, maybe a little bit different way, right? You can look at a piece of creative work today and have no way of knowing whether it emerged from 3 decades of developed taste or 30 minutes of prompting. And the end product, that artifact, that piece of work, it alone has become an unreliable indicator of whether there's even an artist behind it. And that changes everything. Because if the work alone can no longer carry the signal, then where does trust go? Well, a filmmaker who died in 1986 gave me the answer. All right, my favorite filmmaker is Andrei Tarkovsky. And Tarkovsky wrote something in his book, Sculpting in Time, that I keep coming back to. Only when his personal viewpoint is brought in, when he becomes a kind of philosopher, does he emerge as an artist. Now, he was talking about filmmakers, about the difference between someone who's good at executing and someone whose work carries a particular way of seeing. And it seems clear to me that that statement applies with even more force now than when he wrote it. Because in Tarkovsky's era, it was technical competence itself was rare enough to be meaningful. If you could operate a camera well, light a scene properly, or cut with precision, that alone communicates something about your understanding. But now everyone can do that. The tools have democratized execution to the point where execution alone almost says nothing. Now, what still says something? Maybe the only thing that still says something is your viewpoint, your philosophy, the why behind your choices, your perspective. It's the only thing we truly own. All right, here's something that most working creatives understand but don't often talk about. There's a ladder. You know the one. Agency ladder, studio ladder, production company ladder. It's got finite rungs and someone else built it. And someone else really decides how far you travel up that ladder. You prove yourself on smaller projects, you get noticed. You get hired for bigger ones. The work moves you up. But the ladder has a top. And this is how I came up. This is how most of us came up. You wait to be chosen. You wait for the green light. You compete for scarce slots that someone else controls. I built a career off of this. A good one, actually. But there's something else happening now. And it changes everything because alongside that ladder, there's a door. That door has been open for a while. Most of us just haven't walked through it. This door I'm calling the permissionless path. And it's based on what you can actually do, what you've actually learned, and whether you can communicate that clearly enough for people to find you. There's no top to this one because it expands as you grow. And here creatives evolve and pivot and share what they've learned to the people coming up behind them, and the whole thing rises as they rise. This is the permissionless era. And the infrastructure that makes it possible is the same set of platforms that most creatives still think of as social media, like it's a distraction from the real work. Like posting online is separate from the creative practice itself. It's not separate. It's the connective tissue. And this took me a long time to really understand, even though it was the infrastructure that quietly enabled most of my career. Now, there's an objection I hear from serious creatives, and I want to address it directly because it reveals something important about where we're at right now. It goes something like this. I'm not an influencer. I'm not trying to be a personality. I do the work, and the work is the thing. Now, I respect that. I lived that for decades. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you to become an influencer. I'm not telling you to dance on camera or chase trends or turn your creative practice into a performance for strangers. What I'm telling you is that the work on its own is no longer a complete communication. It needs a companion. And that companion is the substantive thinking that went into it. The philosophy, the process, the decisions you made and why you made them. This is what serious creatives have always done, but it's always been in private, on set, in an edit suite, at a table room, in a critique. You explain your choices, you articulate your reasoning, you share the framework that guided you. And the people in the room with you, the collaborators, the clients, the crew, they develop trust in your creative leadership through that exchange, not just through the finished piece of work, but through seeing how you think. The only thing that's changed is that the room no longer is limited to whoever happens to be physically present. Now, I know some of you are thinking, I'm not gonna vlog my edit sessions or turn my process into a performance. These are all the things that were going through my head too. That's not what this is though. Every creative lineage in history has operated through passing down knowledge. Master painters trained apprentices. Jazz musicians taught the next generation through proximity and practice. Directors mentored younger directors on set. The thinking behind the work, shared generously, has always been how creative culture evolved. And the internet made that generosity available at scale. A filmmaker in Prague can learn from a director in LA without either of them asking anyone's permission. A designer in Sao Paulo can study the philosophy of a creative director in Tokyo through their content, apply it, develop their own variation, and pass that variation forward. That's not self-promotion, that's contribution. And the creators who understand the difference, who step out from behind the camera and become a spokesperson for their form of work, for the thinking and the care and the craft that goes into it, they're not cheapening anything. They're completing a communication that the work alone started, but can't finish anymore. All right, so we've cleared the objection. Now let me show you where trust actually goes. So if the finished product is no longer a reliable proxy for the mind that made it, where does trust go? It migrates upstream from the output to the operating system that produced it. Think about what this means in practice. When a client or collaborator is evaluating whether to work with you, the reel or portfolio is still necessary. It's table stakes, but it's not sufficient because they've seen other reels that look just as polished, produced by people whose actual creative judgment they can't evaluate from the work alone. What they can evaluate, what builds real trust, is whether they can see how you think. Now, cognitive scientist John Vervaeke has an incredible framework that clarifies what's actually happening here. He calls it the 4 ways of knowing. The first is propositional knowing, and this is the facts, the information, the things you can write down and transfer. There's procedural knowing, and this is skill, knowing how to do something. Now, AI handles both of those remarkably well, but creative work operates primarily through the other 2. Perspectival knowing. Now, this is seeing the world from your specific vantage point, shaped by your particular history, through your particular questions, the problems you've wrestled with over decades. And then there's what Vervaeke calls participatory knowing. And this is knowing by being. And this kind of knowing is the knowing that results from how you and reality have been co-shaped to fit together. Now, this last one, that's the creative operating system. It's the knowledge that's developed over years of being on set, navigating the tension between vision and commerce. It's not information you possess. It's a relationship between you and the world that required your specific life to develop. And it can't be extracted, uploaded, or replicated because it isn't data. It's the accumulated shape of your engagement with reality. And the creatives who make that operating system visible, who show how they think and why they make the decisions they make, those are the ones that earn the trust in an environment where work alone no longer guarantees it. Now, I've experienced this firsthand. I worked at the highest level internationally for years. The reason clients kept hiring me across borders and industries was not because I could produce a competent commercial, although you had to. Plenty of directors can do that, though. It was because they trusted my specific way of seeing, my ability to hold tension between creative vision and commercial objectives, my judgment about what belonged and what didn't. That trust was built through relationship and through proximity, through seeing how I worked up close. The platforms now let you build that same kind of trust at scale with people you've never met by making visible that creative authorship that your past clients only experience behind closed doors. Okay, everything I've said so far has been about the external landscape, right? The creativity crisis, the trust migration, the permissionless path. But this next part is about you, and it might be the most important idea in this whole conversation. All right, everything you do in this modern creative landscape is about digging into who you are and communicating that essence, the essence of your personal system, your creative operating system. Now, this is the philosophy behind your work, the way you approach problems, the patterns that repeat across everything you make, whether you name them or not. The questions you keep returning to, the things you notice that other people walk right past. Now, most of us creatives never do this hard work. We make choices that feel right without being able to explain why. We have taste without having language for it. We produce coherent work without understanding the coherence, and for a long time that was fine. The work was the communication, but now the work is necessary but insufficient. Now, this is what I call the living proof. The artifact needs its source, right? That piece of work needs the story behind the author that produced it as well. This is about self-understanding, about doing that work of uncovering and discovering what's already operating in your creative practice and then communicating it clearly enough so that other people can see it too. Tarkovsky again. It is a mistake to talk about the artist looking for his subject. In fact, the artist grows within him like a fruit and begins to demand expression. Your essence, your operating system, it's already there. It's been there since your first creative impulse, and every project you've done, every constraint you've navigated, every aesthetic choice you've made has been shaped by it. And now the work is to make it legible to yourself first, then to the world. All right, let's zoom out for a moment, because I've come to understand that there's a structural shift happening that most of us creatives are only seeing the edges of. Social media isn't just a marketing channel. It's a new kind of society, right? And I think for creatives, this means something specific and profound. The same infrastructure that allows someone to build an online business also allows you to do something much older and much more essential. Live the creative life in public. Share the philosophy behind your work. Build relationships with people who resonate with your way of seeing. Create a body of work that includes the process, the thinking, the methodology alongside those finished pieces of work. Now, there's a framework I keep coming back to when I think about what makes a creative life sustainable, and it's this one diagnostic that I wish someone had given me 20 years ago. 4 domains. All interconnected. Neglect any one of these and the others start to deteriorate. The first is creative sustainability. This is about burnout, right? It's about the practices, rhythms, boundaries that allow you to do your best work over decades, not a season, decades. And this is the part most people skip because it doesn't feel urgent until it's too late. The second is creative sovereignty. Now, this is the ability to generate income from your creative practice in ways that don't require you to throw away your vision or trade time for money indefinitely. Sovereignty means the direction originates from within. You're no longer waiting for someone else to tell you what to make. You're deciding. The third is creative community. It's about finding your people, building collaborations that multiply your capabilities, developing an audience that follows your perspective across projects, across mediums, across whatever pivots your creative evolution demands. The fourth is creative meaning, whether the work connects to something that matters to you, whether the search for meaning that drove you into creative work in the first place is being honored by how you practice it. These aren't separate concerns. They're 4 walls in the same room. And that room is your creative life. So what does this look like in practice? How does it actually work? Well, the way I see it, it's 4 pillars, and all 4 pillars are expressions of a single activity. Uncovering your personal creative system and communicating it to the world. Your creative vision isn't a marketing exercise. It's the accumulation of every experience, influence, and discipline you've ever engaged with, and organized through a perspective that only you can hold. For me, vision isn't a noun. Vision is a verb. It's a process. It's an ongoing action. And this is something we'll get deeper into in future videos, but two people can watch the same film, read the same book, walk the same street, and come away with entirely different insights. Because they're filtering through different questions, different wounds, different obsessions. That's what makes your perspective irreplaceable. Now, content in this context isn't tricks and tips. It's the documentation of how your mind works, how you approach problems, how you see connections others miss, how the philosophy behind your work actually operates when it meets the real constraints, a real deadline, a real collaboration. This is where the trust migration becomes tangible. When people see your creative process, your philosophy in action, they develop a relationship with your creative authorship, not just your output. And that relationship is what creates loyalty across projects, mediums, pivots. And it's the thing that AI can't generate because it requires coherent real-life experience to produce. Okay, the work remains essential. It's the evidence. It's proof that your system produces results. And the methodology distilled from the work, the transferable principles, the frameworks that emerge through your process of making, that's the asset you can share. And the progression is natural. You identify a problem in your creative practice, you solve it through a project, you iterate, you refine, you articulate what you learned. And that articulation can become something others can use. You can write a book. You can build a workshop, a course. You can develop a methodology and share it with others. Now, nothing happens if you keep it private. And I know the resistance, I felt it. The idea that the work should speak for itself, that self-promotion is somehow beneath the craft, that putting yourself out there is vanity. It's not vanity. It's what all leaders in their field have done for forever. They've recognized that their imposter syndrome was a natural experience of just getting good at what they do, and they take the helm over culture nonetheless. And the word here I prefer to marketing is evangelism. You're making the case for a way of seeing. You're inviting people into a perspective. Now, that's our responsibility, right? That's the architecture. Now, here's the part that makes it real. Now, there are three ways that this tends to unfold, and the third is the most powerful. Now, the first path is creative service. Learn the skills the industry needs and sell those skills directly. This is the freelance model. It works, it pays, it builds experience. But it's linear. One project, one fee, start over. You're only as good as your last job. The second path is the creative voice. Here you develop your perspective through your own interests and practice. You share them publicly. You build an audience around your way of seeing. Now, this takes longer, but it compounds. The third path, and this is the one I advocate for, is doing both simultaneously. Use service work to fund and develop your practice while building your creative voice in parallel. Every skill you develop for clients becomes a capability you can deploy in your own properties. And every insight from your own practice becomes more valuable to the clients you serve. All right, here's what I know. The creative who waits for permission, who keeps their process private, who believes the work should speak for itself in an era where the work alone no longer can, that creative is operating under rules that no longer apply. Now, the landscape has changed. Trust is migrated from output to the operating system. Your personal creative system, the philosophy, the process, the accumulated judgment, the specific way you see and solve creative problems, that is the actual product. And the beautiful thing is you already have it. The work now is to uncover it, articulate it, share it. And I'm following this path myself, beginning a new way. This is the path of the Polymath. Welcome.